Hello and welcome everyone to the most evil channel on YouTube. It's your boy Big 3 coming at you with the 1093 long summary spoilers. Again, shout out to people like Redon, shout out to people like PewPiece, all these guys on Twitter that come through every single week to give us realistic expectations, the real spoilers to the chapter. And this is a really exciting one. I can't wait to jump into it, but as you guys know, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for the fastest spoiler videos on all of YouTube. Now that we have that out the way, let's jump straight into the content. Chapter 1093, Luffy versus Kizaru. The reader request in the cover is some Tarsiers that are stealing Koby and Helmeppo's glasses. The chapter starts with Kizaru getting spinned around by Luffy, and Kizaru's expression is unchanged. He's very calm. Now this is pretty much expected. We know from the very beginning of Kizaru's introduction to One Piece that he's very cool, calm, and collected. I'm actually waiting to see him stressed out. I want to see him like really angry, maybe even sad. I want to see him screaming. I want to see some kind of emotion come out of Kizaru. That hasn't happened yet, so I'm expecting there to be more fighting and more battles between him and Luffy until he reveals that kind of side of him. And I think when he does, Oda's gonna do a really good job. I can just picture like maybe the end of a chapter, we get like a double page spread and we see Kizaru looking really nervous, or maybe he's shaking or really angry. I think Oda's really preparing us, you know, for that moment, and I think it's gonna hit us really hard once we finally do get to see that. Moving on to the next point, cut to the control room. Vegapunk decides to go to the Fabioso phase with Sanji and Atlas. They want to save Bonnie and to change the pacifist's orders with the authority chip. Vegapunk will use his own vehicle, the Vega Tank. Vegapunk refers to Bonnie as a little child, and he talks about her as if she's a really small kid. It seems Bonnie's real age may be younger than what we think. Now this is something that's already been theorized for quite some time now, because there has been panels and moments sprinkled throughout the Egghead Island arc that kind of imply that Bonnie is a child, and seeing how she can make other people older, make other people younger, turn people into babies, and we saw her alter her own age of Marijois, it makes a lot of sense that she would be someone younger than what we think. And if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of the Egghead Island arc, I think around chapter 1060, we saw Bonnie fall out of the warm eddy, and she looked to be like a little girl, like a little kid in that moment. So yeah, like this point by Redon, it makes a lot of sense to me. Vegapunk's dialogue implying her to be a little girl makes a lot of sense to me. But just to quickly touch on the Vega Tank thing, I think this reminds me of the Fishman Island arc. If you guys remember when Frankie was running around the island with all the mermaids doing his thing, I'm pretty sure he had his own tank at that time, and then maybe even sometime during Wano he also had a tank. I have to kind of jog my memory about that, but this makes a lot of sense, and I like to see this, you know, the connections between him and Vegapunk, considering that he went to Vegapunk's island, Karakuri Island, during the time skip where we know he hit the button and, you know, the island exploded. It made like the mushroom cloud. It makes a lot of sense that Vegapunk and Frankie would have like a lot of tech that's pretty similar to each other, and I'm curious to see how far Oda's gonna take it. Are we gonna get more panels, more development where Frankie's working alongside Vegapunk? Maybe they do say Vegapunk, throw him on the ship, and Vegapunk starts giving him tech. Like, I really hope that's a road that Oda considers going down. Moving on to the next point, Nami, Usopp, and Edison remain in the control room. Jinbei's carrying all of Vegapunk's stuff to the back of the island. Lilith is using Frankie's Shogun to carry the Thousand Sunny at the same point that Jinbei is going to. Frankie's going down the Fabioso phase too. Cut to the Fabioso phase. Bonnie is there fighting against the Marines. Sentomaru saved her when Bonnie was falling down and she hit the Egghead barrier. Then Sentomaru passes out. You know, I'm still on the train that Sentomaru will die by the end of this arc. I feel like, you know, we had that flashback for a reason. We see him becoming the bodyguard of Vegapunk for a reason. There has to be some kind of death that takes place this arc, and I think Sentomaru's you know, he's a good option for that. He should die and take a devastating blow to save Vegapunk, and maybe that's what's gonna happen in the next few chapters. Maybe, you know, Kizaru keeps running up to Vegapunk, and then when Kizaru throws a devastating punch, Sentomaru kind of takes the blow and dies. We saw recently that happen with Stussy. She jumped in front of, I believe it was Lucci, correct? And she took the big blow through her stomach. I could see Sentomaru going through something like that. But just to quickly touch on the Bonnie stuff again, I do want to see her age up the Seraphim, because we had that little dialogue panel earlier in the Egghead Island arc. I believe is when we saw S-Shark, the Jinbei Seraphim. I think someone made a comment like, oh, can you just imagine how strong they would be when they're older, when they're adults? And then Oda kind of diverted from that conversation and he showed us a different part of the island. That's a common foreshadowing technique Oda has done time and time again. He has like these comments that kind of imply something in the future, something that questions the setting, the surroundings, interrupts the conversation, and later on down the line, exactly what was theorized ends up happening. So yeah, again, with Bonnie perhaps being a younger girl and we see her age up all these different people, perhaps the Straw Hats will get the Seraphims to work alongside them, them, and then Bonnie will age them up, and this will really bolster and, you know, buff up the Alliance side in terms of, you know, the Straw Hats versus the world government right now. On to the next point, cut to Zoro versus Lucci. Zoro's swords have flames on them and Lucci's using his awakened form. Kaku doesn't appear this chapter. With this level, you won't get to fight our captain. It is worth killing number 2 of the Yonko crew. Now this is another Lucci L, another Kaku L, another CP9 CP0 L. These guys are just complete jokes. I don't know why people even argued during the Onigashima arc that CP0 is going to be a devastating threat, that Blue Scarf was going to be Yonko level and he was going to compete with Kaido and Luffy. That was complete nonsense, and you know, we all kind of agree that Lucci's about to lose to Zoro, the number 2 in the crew. Like, no way in hell can he even go against Luffy, so why was that statement even made? Like, it's actually sad how bad these guys are, and like Lucci's awakened ability seems to have not really helped that much. You know, having Zoro pull out these flame swords, it doesn't seem to be Ashura. It doesn't seem to be like he opened his Sharingan finally and he's gonna get clapped by Zoro. So, you know, I love to see this. Cypher Pole, they're just a whole bunch of garbage. They don't really amount to anything. And, you know, why do you guys think that they introduced CP0 and CP9 this arc? Do you think it was solely to lose to Zoro? Or do you think it's because Lucci was passing information to the Gorosei? Do you think they're gonna end up doing something? Like, largely CP9, CP0, the Cypher Pole agents, they've just been really, really whack. On to the next point, back to Luffy versus Kizaru. Luffy throws Kizaru into the sea. Oh, I'm gonna fall into the sea. However, Kizaru flies back and creates multiple light clones of himself. It seems like this is an extension of his Yasakani no Magatama technique. Kizaru's clones give Luffy minor injuries with their light swords. Now, I've always made this kind of comparison or this kind of idea where it's like, it'd be really funny, really cool if Oda had Imu, the final villain of One Piece, appear to be like Naruto, and maybe his devil fruit power and his powers allow him to make clones, and it's kind of like almost like a fourth wall break, or, you know, the final battle is Luffy versus Naruto, but it's not actually Naruto. And, you know, we have stuff similar to that we've seen already, because if you guys remember when Luffy was on Zou and he found the red poneglyph up in the whale tree, we saw Raizo there, of course, because Raizo was safe, and Raizo was using ninja techniques, ninja scrolls to clone himself. So I think like this is kind of cool. I don't really necessarily think there's a connection between Kizaru and Raizo, considering again we know why Raizo was able to do that, but maybe that was some kind of like foreshadow. Maybe that was like a minor precursor to what we're seeing now. And, you know, I'm wondering like how strong of an ability this is, because reading these spoilers, it seems like it's just like something pretty cool he could just pull out from his back pocket when needs be, but it seems like Luffy kind of got rid of those clones instantaneously. So yeah, I think we're gonna land ourselves into a Kizaru defeat. I think this is gonna be one of the first, or I guess the first time that an admiral in the One Piece world ends up losing to a pirate, let alone some kind of Yonko crew. I know you can kind of argue that Shanks used Conqueror's Haki on Green Bull and made him run away, but I don't really see that as a battle. I don't really see that as a defeat. I can see how that's like an L for Admiral fans and Green Bull or whatever, but I think this arc is going to be, again, the first defeat of an admiral. And, you know, I'm more curious to see, you know, what Saturn's going to do. I do believe that he's going to have some kind of encounter with Luffy. Maybe Luffy's going to have to give this Kizaru battle to somebody else while Luffy takes on the Saturn battle. But either way, no matter which way you slice it, I do lean towards the defeat of Kizaru this arc. And I also want to see the awakened version of his fruit this arc. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you guys think that Kizaru is going to use his awakening this arc? Moving on to the next point, Luffy uses Gomu Gomu no Dawn stamp to destroy all the Kizaru clones, but real Kizaru is not there. Real Kizaru has returned to the control room to kill Vegapunk, but Vegapunk's already gone. Kizaru flies towards Vega tank and attacks it with the light, but Luffy follows him and defends the Vega tank. Luffy takes in Kizaru's lights and splits it into multiple directions. Now again, as I said, these clones by Kizaru don't seem like much of a problem. They don't seem very formidable. So, you know, I'm kind of curious as to why Oda had Kizaru pull this out of his inventory, out of his hat. I mean, just to showcase more Kizaru powers, I guess. But, you know, again, Luffy took care of it really well. And I'm more interested in the Gomu Gomu no Dawn stamp. It seems like this is going to be a whole new umbrella for Luffy attacks, where obviously you have Dawn and then insert thing here. So maybe Dawn Gatling or Dawn Bajrang gun. I don't know how far Oda would take it, but, you know, I'm really curious because, you know, we have Luffy finally getting his gear 5th, his pinnacle, his peak, and we finally have Luffy using an awakening. And what comes out of this seems to be a whole new subgenre of attacks called Dawn, and I think that's going to really push us towards what the D clan, you know, really stands for, what the true power of Nika was and is. I don't necessarily think think that D stands for Dawn. I think it stands for Davy. And if you guys are curious on that, I have a video at the top right of the screen. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this whole kind of Dawn thing. Is this something interesting? Were you expecting this? What kind of attacks do you see coming from this whole Dawn subgenre? And moving on to the final point, the Vegapunk arrives safe to the Fabuloso phase. Chapter ends with Atlas overriding Kizaru's orders to the pacifistas. But in the last panel, the scene changes and we see Saturn staring menacingly. End of chapter, break next week. Now I suppose it's kind of cool to see Saturn staring menacingly this chapter, you know, giving this kind of glare, scaring the reader, scaring the people on Egghead Island. But I don't really think this, you know, develops anything. We all figured that Saturn was on Egghead Island to begin with, so maybe this is a tease for us seeing him do something in chapter 1094, this next upcoming chapter. You know, other than that, like, again, we kind of know Saturn is already there, and a lot of people figured that Saturn's going to be a fighter, being that he's the scientific warrior defense, and they sent him specifically to Egghead. So it would make a lot of sense if he was able to use or manipulate the technology that Vegapunk has, and maybe even have this grandiose battle with Luffy. Because you guys know all throughout the story, it's a reoccurring theme, it's a reoccurring pattern to have Luffy fight the guy at the top. Obviously, there's very few and far between outliers, such as Spandam, where he was kind of leading CP9, but he was the weakest. Again, like, that's very, very rare. Generally, Luffy fights the top guy. So again, with the Gorosei Saturn leading the world government and, you know, being in charge of Kizaru, in charge of Cypher Pole, it makes a lot of sense that if he was going to have a grand battle this arc, that it would be against Luffy. And we also got to think about how there's going to be this great Egghead incident that shakes the world that no one expects. It could be, you know, the defeat of Saturn. Maybe he doesn't die or anything, but it could be the defeat of Saturn to, you know, Yonko pirate Luffy, and then this would really shake the world. But yeah, guys, that's about it. Break next week. I'm sad and depressed. I you know, let Oda take his breaks and let him rest, but these breaks have been kind of brutal the past few months. You know, let me know what you guys think. Are you guys cool with the breaks? Did you guys enjoy the video? Like, subscribe, hit the noti bell for the fastest spoiler videos on YouTube. But that's all I got for you. Peace.